Hello and welcome to the Relax It's Retirement podcast with your host, Josh Leonard, where we talk about transitioning into retirement with intent. I'm Wendy McConnell. Well, hey there, fellas.
Hey, Wendy, how are you today?
I'm good. We have Pete Belcastro along with Josh, and they're together.
We are
in the flesh.
in front of this cozy fireplace setting, really.
The only thing missing is a fire.
That's true. I have tested it. I'm just not super confident that it's venting correctly. So instead of, potentially killing ourselves while recording a podcast.
Yes, yeah.
We'll just, let it be.
Next time. Time.
That's right. That's right.
I expect fire.
The ambience. Yeah.
I think right now, I'm sure it's freezing cold where you are too, but I think most of the country has been in a pretty extreme cold spell as we're recording this. And yesterday morning, I woke up here in Pittsburgh and the Alexa said -15. I don't think that was accurate, but anything close to that, negative anything just hurts to me. So,
well, yeah, I went out in 11 the other day and I thought that was painful.
It is, yeah. But, wind makes all the difference in the world.
Yes.
It certainly can make it a lot cooler, even if it's not -15 or 11.
Yeah. I think anything after 0 is rough,
Yeah.
Below, yes. What will we be focusing on today, guys?
Well, today we're going to take a trip through time, Wendy. The retiree's time machine. So here we're going to talk through some lessons to be learned now so you can thank your future self. I think about this as a dad a lot. I remember my dad saying things to me. And, the funny part is I say them to my kids now, too. But I didn't learn it when he told me. Like the kids are really excited running through the house and they slam a door. And I say, don't slam the door, because now I have to pay to fix the door when the door is broken.
I walk around all day just Alexa, lights off. Alexa, lights off. I know.
Yeah, back in my day, we had to actually flip the switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, tough life having to switch those switch. I mean, they can be heavy at times, right? And
yes, and don't even get me started on the remote control.
Absolutely. Or if you lose the remote control. I don't know if you have this experience, but a lot of the ceiling fans now have a remote control.
Oh.
So you'll have a switch, but then also if you lose that remote control, it sort of doesn't help to have a fan.
Yeah.
Because it's either on or off. But, these are some of the challenges we face now. I think looking back in time, maybe our grandparents would say that they didn't even have lights. So, we can be grateful for any iteration there.
Exactly.
So, light switches can cause us all troubles or help advance things along. Much like any challenge in life, we have to plan ahead. So some of these lessons that we talk through today are going to help us do that. A few years ago, I was doing a marathon out of town and met with a relative, and I was having dinner with him and his daughter, and he knew, of course, that I was a financial advisor and kept bringing up this, I wish when I was your age, I would have saved more. If I would have saved more. Which was kind of funny to me because as a kid, he was always that guy that seemed to have really nice things. He had a new car. He, drank expensive wine. He sort of had this aura that he had everything figured out. While now, in hindsight, he just earned a lot of money at that time, but also spent a lot of money at that time. So as a retiree, we don't want to be living in regret. We want to make sure that we're taking actions from the get-go so that our future self is grateful for it. So jumping right in, Pete, what is a common retirement anxiety or concern that we hear from clients?
I mean, probably one of the things we hear the most is that they're afraid of running out of money.
Yeah.
I mean, we can imagine that, expenses start piling up, healthcare costs, or they have experiences with parents and they saw the rising costs there. So that is one of the greatest concerns that we do see, along with healthcare costs.
Yeah.
And what it is going to take to just keep the engine moving.
Well, I think you brought up parents too. Sometimes caring for a parent can cause us to retire a little bit earlier. Maybe we're in our mid 60s, we're planning to work to 70, but mom and dad need some extra care. And you're you're not quite ready to just go put them in a facility, right? You'd rather spend that time, help care for them. By forcing yourself into retirement sooner, you need a little bit more money to make that gap work. For mom and dad, too, you also get that firsthand experience of how big medical bills can be, weighing out that option between going to a home or, staying at home.
Yeah, so you can see these expenses start to pile up, and like we said, it could be really uncomfortable. Almost like if we walked outside, today without a coat on.
Yeah.
It's going to be painful, probably.
Yeah, I think in the scenario of having to leave work a little bit earlier, having that foundation of a plan ahead of time can really help you transition there. Without that plan, without that baseline of knowing where you stand and making the decision in the best interest of your family, you might be hurting yourself in the later years and have less options when you need additional care.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the flexibility and, just to being, knowing that things are going to change and you need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, certainly. I think, in terms of healthcare too, we talk to clients. We certainly have talked on the podcast too, making sure we're reviewing our Medicare benefits, making sure that we're looking at our prescription drugs once a year, making sure that our plan is reducing our costs as much as possible. Those are all keys to success, when we're planning out to try to reduce that so our future self isn't upset of, hey, I spent all this money on medical expenses, and now in hindsight at the end of the year, could have saved $2,000 on that prescription.
Yeah, I think that, sometimes retirees or all of us have in our head, once we get to that 65 number, we can start looking at Medicare and people believe that that's going to cover everything.
Yep.
There's not going to be any additional cost, and it's going to be one low fee. So that's just something to be aware of, that there are additional things that Medicare itself isn't going to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. That trying to keep your expenses in check. I reviewed with a client this year by switching around where they picked up their prescriptions, and then also they went back to the doctor, and for one drug there was a generic available. Switching to the generic, they saved $2,500 a year. I don't know about you, Wendy, or you, Pete, but I could take $2,500 more. That's a real amount of money to me.
Bring it on.
Yeah, it's not like saving a buck or two, right? Because sometimes we'll look at it and, well, if you go to this pharmacy versus that one, you might only save a buck or two, but $2,500 is a real amount of money. So
yeah, you can put that in your Roth IRA, Josh.
You could, as long as you have earned income. Otherwise, you have to convert it, Wendy. But I like it. You're in the right track. I love it. I think that's it. Building that plan, looking ahead of time. Things in life will come up. So we'll need to inevitably pivot, but having a baseline plan that we can use to assess those decisions is important. Maybe you decide to take care of mom and dad, even though that could cause you to run out of money early. Maybe you're fortunate. Mom and dad might leave you a little bit of money then at the end to kind of help on the backside. So just knowing your situation can help so that you don't have regret later on.
Absolutely.
That also makes me think of taxes. So many times people forget about taxes in retirement, or Pete had brought up Medicare. If we take a bunch of money out of our IRA, our first year in retirement, let's say we decide to buy an RV because we've always wanted to drive across the country. And we have all this money in our IRA or 401k. So we pull that all out. Well, Hurricane Irma is coming for us 2 years down the line. So 2 years later, we're going to be paying more for Medicare. So let's strategically plan. If the goal is to buy that RV, maybe we take smaller amounts of money out over a couple-year time period.
Yeah. So you're talking about decreasing those payments or not increasing them, 2 years prior. So there are, even though you are retired, even though you're onto, instead of accumulating money, you're onto the distribution side. There are things that we can do to, save a little bit money. And my favorite Ben Franklin quote is, "A penny saved is a penny earned." So if you start looking at these different things and you pay attention to them in retirement, that's where you can find these extra funds. So, a lot of people feel like, I got this budget and things start piling up and here I am pushed into a corner, and you're really not. There are options. There are different things that you can do, different strategies and plans that you can do to make sure that maybe you can free up a little extra cash.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. If you could free up $2,500 from medical expenses, I think most folks would rather spend that on traveling or something fun.
Yeah.
Maybe even a Taylor Swift ticket.
Ooh, that's a good option.
I think, this also, thinking of an RV or a big purchase like that, to me, that also brings up debt in retirement. I think Pete and I sometimes will even look at debt a little bit differently. Traditionally, a lot of folks would say, hey, I'm retired. I need to have my house paid off, right? That is a very traditional thing. I don't want any debt at all. I think in my perspective, and I know Pete agrees with this, definitely get rid of the credit card, right? Like, that is high interest debt. That's not going to help you at all. But we need to manage that debt in retirement, because all debt is going to have a fixed payment, or maybe variable if we're in a really bad case, that we have to pay in retirement. Therefore, we need more income coming in.
Yeah. I think that, you look at the type of debt that you have, and there are some things that, it might be okay to carry that into retirement a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you start looking at something that has a high interest rate. We're talking about, I mean, I would consider a high interest rate really anything over 5%. I would consider that to start getting a little high. But you look at these credit cards, I mean, right now, somewhere in the 20%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be really detrimental. And like you said, the payment could vary. So if you have these type of loans, adjustable rate mortgages or lines of credits, and in this environment currently, we're expecting maybe some more, rate cuts. So, hey, things can really, it can throw some, really throw a wrench into things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think focusing on paying that down, if you're listening and maybe you're 5 or 10 years out of retirement, and maybe you are the consumer that has used the credit card as your emergency fund. So we talk about the cash bucket, the emergency fund, a lot on the podcast. For many folks in their working years, money's tight. You're trying to raise a family, maintain cars, all the other stuff. So you're using that credit card as your emergency fund, right? If a home appliance goes or something, you're just putting it on the credit card and you're going to worry about it later. And then before you know it, you have $10,000 in credit card debt. That is something to focus on prior to retirement. That is not a good thing to transition into retirement with.
Yeah. What if you have more than one card? How do we go about figuring out what to pay first? What's the best option?
So the best option is the one that gets rid of your debt. That's
very helpful.
You like that? You like that, Wendy? I got you. There's two main methodologies that people use. Dave Ramsey has a lot of great courses. He's been very active at churches in helping people with debt reduction. And what he believes in and what he teaches is what's called the snowball strategy. So you take the smallest debt and pay it off first. And the idea there is kind of psychologically driven, right? Hey, I paid something off. Good for me. I'm going to take on the next one. And then you work your way up to get rid of all that debt. That's a great strategy. I can see Pete's like, yeah, accept. So roll with it, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great strategy. I think, having a plan in place, and I think making sure that you start off with the right mindset, like Josh mentioned about running a marathon. Like if you just look at that, I mean, it's freaking impossible. But we even know that whenever you are even running, that, hey, let me get these small goals. I'm going to get to that mailbox. I'm going to get to this telephone pole. I mean, that's how you get through these things. I think that with credit cards, it's almost like you have an option when you're running the marathon. It's like, hey, I can take out these credit cards, or and kind of make those small goals, but I'd rather take out the one that has a really high interest first.
Yeah.
So you got the same amount of money going, so I would start to look at those higher interest rates, because that effect can actually compound things as well. Yep. But I think the important thing is to take those small bites, no matter what, is realizing that this is one step at a time. It's not going to happen overnight.
I think you're right. Most people feel hopeless when they look at like a $10,000 debt. Maybe your paycheck coming in is only, $2,000 per paycheck. And you look at 10,000, you're like, I can't, so I'm barely getting by now. How in the world can I pay off $10,000? Right. Well, eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? You just, even if it's $50, pay something towards that debt. What you were talking about there, kind of prioritizing maybe off of highest interest, is what they refer to as the avalanche method, where we attack the highest, what debt is costing us the most money. Now, from a purely financial standpoint, man, that's the way to go, right? You're paying less interest overall. Let's attack that highest interest debt first. I think Dave Ramsey disagrees with that in the methodology that, hey, it might feel hopeless. People are not feeling like they're achieving anything if that high interest debt is a larger amount. So, like I said initially, Wendy, the winning strategy is the one that gets rid of your debt.
Right.
Buying into a plan is the way that you win. So in running a marathon, in achieving anything that's going to take some time, you need to know what the plan is and stick with it.
Well, and what we did is, and I'm sure I'm going to get a huge pat on the back for this, is we borrowed money from our 401k plan to pay off the credit card debt. That was good, right?
Yeah. I mean, you did eliminate.
I have a feeling it wasn't the right thing. Go ahead. Yell at me what I do wrong.
I won't yell at you. I mean, 401k loans are an option. The good thing about a 401k loan is it's a loan. You do have to pay it back. It's probably withheld from your paycheck, Wendy, or your partner's. That's okay. You're not paying taxes on that. You're not paying a 10% penalty for being young and taking out retirement funds. However, we do kind of view retirement funds as sacred, and they're meant for retirement. So unless we absolutely need to, let's not do that. I think for me, as looking at people's finances and in a planning sense, I want to look at, well, how did we get to that place to begin with? And many times that place is either overspending or we just didn't have the emergency fund to protect us. So great, let's get rid of the debt by any means, and then let's start building that emergency fund so we can avoid that in the future.
Okay.
That's right. Everything, if it's designed for retirement, use it for retirement, usually there's a reason why. I think that it's great to have options, that if we're drowning in debt, we can do anything we can to get out of that. But that is, if we have an account designed for something, we want to use it for that. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of reasons why, even just the fact that once you take that money out, even though you might be, sometimes people feel like it's, hey, I'm paying myself back. Mm-hmm. If we're out of the market for 5 of the best days during the year, your return can severely suffer.
Absolutely.
And it's staggering, how those things can compound. So it's something that part of the strategy, you need to work it into your plan. So like we talked about, like if you have this as part of the plan and there's something that, hey, you know what, we can knock out these debt and I can have this paid back in 6 months. Let's do that instead of losing 20% if it's on a credit card.
Yeah. I think the other big caution that we've run into with 401k plans is if you lose your job, if you're no longer employed at that place, sorry, you got to pay that back or it's fully taxable.
That's been a concern. But I paid mine back early. I'm just going to put that out there. I was using myself as an example.
Yeah. It is a realistic thing. Many years ago, before my dad was in the business, he was in the architectural business. He drew for a glass company. And he drew, but then also managed some of the guys in the shop. And this was before he was in the industry. But he would always tell the guys in the shop, like, put the money in your 401k. The company's giving you a match. Like, you're leaving money on the table. Get it. And then one of the guys showed up with a brand new Harley to work the one day. And he goes, well, where'd you get the money? He goes, that account you've been telling me to put money in? Did you know you could take a loan out of it? The guy lost his job 3 weeks later.
Oh, no.
So that Harley ended up costing a lot more money. And any of that savings and that match pretty much all got frittered away in the taxation of it. So we need to be careful. It is a tool, Wendy, and sometimes that is the best answer to get rid of debt. But we have to be cautious, like any tool.
All these products, there's a reason why they have, the different goals designed with them. So it's nice that we can build in some flexibility, and that's an important part of retirement planning.
I think so too. Yeah, a flexibility factor is critical in retirement. Having that optionality, as we talked about at the beginning, if mom and dad need extra help, or maybe a kid needs help. I know. Really glad for grandparents having young kids that are all retired now, because if I need to travel, if Yana and I are both traveling for work, hey, my parents can come stay at the house. The kids can go to school. That was not part of their initial retirement plan. Although they're quite happy to spend time with their grandkids, that flexibility is really important. I think many times we'll set out a plan for people and they're like, oh, I'm only going to spend this exact amount. And we know that's not the case, right? Something's going to change. You pick up a pickleball habit, and then before you know it, you don't just need tennis shoes, boots, and dress shoes. You also need pickleball shoes.
That's right, and cute little squirts to go with it.
Yeah, all that stuff. I didn't know that there was specific pickleball shoes until more recently. I'm like, aren't they? Don't you just wear like tennis shoes?
They're called court shoes. So yeah, I mean,
Okay.
basically, a court shoe covers it all. That's called marketing, Josh.
It is.
I just what 4 court shoes make a gallon, right? That's all. Okay.
Pete with the jokes today.
I like it. I think in flexibility and planning, kind of as we talked about with debt, having cash is important, right? Having something that is liquid and available with low or no tax impact is going to make a huge difference in your retirement. If the water heater starts leaking, the roof or the water heater breaks, the roof is leaking, and the car breaks down all at once, it's really good if we don't have to swipe the credit card for all those expenses. Many times too, in home repairs too, sometimes cash can help you out a little bit more. We've talked about credit card fees now. A lot of times with service providers, they're charging you an extra 3%. Might not seem like a lot until you have a really big, expensive home repair, and 3% could be a substantial amount of money. So, having that flexibility there is great. We had a client 2 years ago now that their son had a very well-paying finance job, was very self-sufficient, but really did not like the stress of the job. He was not happy in the job and wanted to do something different. Called mom and dad and said, hey, I'm moving to Texas. I'm going back to school to go to medical school. As a parent, I think I'd be proud. I mean, medical school is always good, right?
Yeah.
He had figured out the ability to pay for medical school, but was looking at housing options. And in the market he was looking in, rent was sky high, and he had owned a home previously. So he was hoping to be able to buy a house and maybe have a roommate or two to rent out too. When he went to the bank, it's a guy that is going to incur a bunch of debt with no job. That is not a good person to loan money to, right? He is working through medical school. So although the bank doesn't see it that way, in the client's eyes, they were saying, hey, it's my son. They're going through a good endeavor. In their retirement plan, they had enough in stocks and in a brokerage account that they could actually supply the mortgage to the son. So they did have to sell some stocks. We needed to kind of look through the stocks, make sure they weren't getting hit with too high of a capital gain, but they were able to provide a private fund to help him buy a small house in the area.
There's a lot of times, even whenever just to kind of piggyback on what Josh was saying, there's an option as well. Instead of oftentimes it's not available to you in like 401ks, but you can borrow against your money. So oftentimes people think that a home is the only place to have equity build up. So thanks. And in reality, you can use your equity portfolio as collateral. So without having to withdraw the money, without having to take it out of the market, you can borrow against it at a better interest rate, right? So we have different tiers of interest rates. The best usually is tied to real estate, right? It's not going anywhere, and the worst interest rate is going to be those unsecured, those credit cards that aren't tied to anything. And so these investments are right above that real estate, right above that actual property, right above actual cash. So, looking at different ways to utilize the assets that you do have, we leverage those things as well when these unexpected costs come.
I think you bring up a great point. You can loan against a brokerage account, like I talked about with this client. They had enough funds without a huge capital gain, but maybe you bought Amazon stock and your whole brokerage account was Amazon stock. And that was like a tax time bomb because it's done so well. And well, if you sell it, you're losing 15 to 20% on almost all of it because your gain is a really good problem to have. Yeah. But it's not efficient in that case to be loaning out. We can take a loan against those stock positions and give that money to the son. And oh, by the way, the son's interest rate should be tied just a little bit higher than the interest rate you're paying.
Right.
That way, all else being equal, you're doing just fine on that. You'll be able to cover the cost of that loan while also providing an opportunity to a family member.
Okay.
I think sometimes we hear regrets from folks too. I think that is something that in retirement, we certainly don't want to be at the end of our life feeling like, well, I shoulda, right? We want to take advantage of that. We've heard from people maybe now that have lost their mobility more that I wish I would have traveled more in my early years of retirement. Or maybe I wish I would have retired a year or two earlier because my timeline wasn't as long as I thought. Those are things that we need to factor in. Now, having that plan and knowing, is it feasible to retire early or not, is important. Maybe that means having some part-time work so that you don't have that regret later on. You could still travel, spend more time with family, but also not be a slave to the desk.
Yeah. I think the one consistent thing we do see is that we wish we could go back in time. If I could go back, I could do this thing. Or, so whenever you are thinking of your future self, the you that's going to be there next year, or 5 years, 10 years, or in retirement for 20 years, a lot of people don't, you think we get to retirement and retirement planning stops and we've hit that number. But no, this thing could continue for a long time frame. So, I think that's, keep that in mind.
Yeah, certainly so. I think, another regret that we've heard from clients too is not like diversifying early enough. So I can think of one prospective client. They never actually became a client, but they had worked for GE here in Pittsburgh. And GE was a great stock until it wasn't. And their income was tied to GE. And I think it was 85% of their 401k was concentrated in GE stock. So they lost their job and the stock plummeted. Now, for years, they felt really good about that. Now, he clearly had some regret about not diversifying. So, in that investment planning, in that piece of your plan, make sure you're being prudent there so you don't have regrets down the line.
Yeah, I think understanding exactly what you need to return really is important because it can keep you grounded. If you have a portfolio designed, that you only, let's just say that to reach your goals, you need to make 7% on that portfolio. And then somebody comes out of left field and tells you they made 100% return. And then you start getting upset because you didn't make that. But if you stay grounded and you realize that, hey, I don't need to make that. This achieves my plan. This gets me to retirement and through retirement.
Yep.
That helps a lot.
Yeah. I think thinking about running a marathon, right? Well, I would like to finish a marathon in an hour, right? But the most elite athletes are not doing that. So this dad athlete is not going to do that, right? We can set a practical benchmark to track to and work to. If we look at the long-term U.S. stock market, it's somewhere around 10% over a long period of time. If you are consistently making well above that in returns, it could be a caution sign, right? Maybe you're too concentrated in one stock position. And hopefully that lasts for a while, but you need to understand that can cut both ways. Typically, those stocks that are outpacing the market are taking a little bit more risk. Maybe the company is investing more aggressively into technology that they're hoping. Hopefully that works out, but that's better to be a smaller piece of your portfolio rather than all of your portfolio.
Yep.
Just last night, I taught a class on Social Security. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're hearing, hey, I heard all this stuff about taxes, not regretting, healthcare expenses, making a plan. In the Pittsburgh area this year, we are teaching 26 classes through AFIA, a nonprofit. So they're free workshops that people can attend in the Pittsburgh area. So we'll put a link in the show notes to the AFIA webpage where you can see any of those upcoming classes. That's a great chance to be in a live class. So although Pete and I can talk on the podcast with Wendy's assistance here, this is a way to interact in person. So I encourage you to check those out. We'll be covering topics like Social Security, like I did last night, tax planning in retirement, maybe even a full retirement course later on in the year. So Check that out. You can sign up for our Pittsburgh chapter of that nonprofit, and you'll be updated. You'll get an email every time we set up a new class.
Okay.
This subject that we covered today, this time machine too, we've put together in our monthly newsletter. So again, in the show notes, if you click into those show notes, you will be able to see the link to that. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter, and you'll be able to read through these. You'll also get the future announcements that we have and future newsletters there. Well, Pete, Wendy, thanks so much for joining today. I hope all of those on the podcast today maybe thought through the progression of candles to smart lights at the beginning here, and maybe they gained some insight on debt or proper income planning. We hope to be able to help you, so join us for one of our classes, sign up for the newsletter. We'd love to help you. Until next time, remember to retire with intent so you can live your golden years with the happiness and excitement you deserve.